friction, spring scale, friction, static friction, sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. Key questions: what is force and how is it measured? How is motion affected by balanced and unbalanced forces? What is friction? And what are the four types of friction? So we want to know what a force is. And forces are important because the world is full of them, because they're always pushing and pulling on things. Many times things are set in motion due to forces, or because of balanced forces, they stay at whatever motion they're in. Now, a force is generally just defined as a push or a pull. And force is measured in a unit called a Newton, named after Sir Isaac Newton, a famous English scientist. And 1 Newton is equal to 1 kilogram times 1 meters per second squared. And in lab, we'll use a spring scale to measure force. Now, force, like acceleration and velocity, has a directional component. It's a vector quantity. And we use that direction in our diagrams of using an arrow. Now, how is motion? How are moving things, and things that aren't moving, but we know everything is moving, how's that affected by balanced and unbalanced forces? So in all these situations, we're going to be looking at arrows indicating forces, the direction of the push or the pull, and a number in newtons indicating the amount of force. So in an unbalanced force, that will cause an object to start moving or change its motion somehow. So unbalanced forces change motion. Now, something at a constant speed and direction, right, that is unchanging. Now, if we want to accelerate something and cause an acceleration, we need a force. So in this right here, how do we make this sphere move to the right? Where would we put the arrow? Well, we'd put them on this side, on the left side, pushing it to the right, or you put them on this side, pulling it to the right. Now, how would we move this sphere here to the left? Now, balanced forces will not change an object's motion. Balanced forces are equal and opposite. Now, in this one, draw arrows of force that are balanced. What do you think they would look like? Multiple forces acting on an object are represented by multiple arrows. So think of 2 people pulling on one large crate, or 3 or 4 different forces acting on one object. All those forces put together are called the net force. What is the net force on this circle? What direction will it go? Now, one of the main unbalanced forces that we need to understand is friction. And friction is a force that opposes motion and a force that one surface exerts on another when they rub together. Friction slows things down. So it goes against whatever that force is you're pushing on it. And friction exists almost everywhere that we can imagine. Even the slightest amount, even in outer space, there's a very slight friction. Not much, but it is there. So we need to understand friction because it affects motion of every kind here on Earth. Everything that moves, cars, bikes, your hands waving through the air, anything that moves encounters friction on Earth. So every time we look at a situation, we need to understand what friction is doing to the motion and the forces involved. Now, there's 4 types of friction that we're going to talk about. There's static friction, which exists between any 2 objects that have contact that are not moving. Now, static friction is generally greater than sliding friction and must be overcome before that object can be set in motion. So if you remember, you've ever tried to move something really big, it took a big push to get it started. Well, that's that static friction that you're trying to overcome. Sliding friction is that associated with dragging or pushing something across a floor or a surface. That's sliding friction. Rolling friction is a lot less than sliding friction. Rolling friction, there are wheels that allow it to roll, so that friction is less. Fluid friction exists wherever there's a fluid, and fluids include air and water. That's what we're generally going to talk about when we have fluid friction. And these are both fluids, and you've heard about how to make things aerodynamic. Well, that is trying to overcome the limitations of fluid friction. That air and that water will hinder the motion of objects, including spacecraft, cars, boats, anything you can think of has to go through the fluid. You need to be aerodynamic and get through that fluid friction. Well, that's it for these notes. Keep them in mind as you continue your journey through forces.